It was the spring of 2006. The 24-year-old shooting guard Dwyane Wade was completing one of the best individual performances of the decade in what was only his third NBA season. Wade went on to win the ring just a few weeks later with the help of a Shaquille O'Neal who was already showing signs of regression.
And the Miami Heat are champions of the basketball world!
The Heat went on to win the first championship in franchise history, and Dwyane earned his first and only Finals MVP, elevating him to become one of the best players of his generation. Does the story ring a bell? Well, you'll probably be able to understand what I'm getting at. If we look for any precedent for what Anthony Edwards and the Minnesota Timberwolves are accomplishing in the modern NBA, it's hard to find. Surely Wade and those Heat are the closest thing when they got that incredible championship run almost 20 seasons ago. But if Ant were to lift the Larry O'Brien this season, his feat might be even more spectacular. Clearly we're talking about a best-case scenario. Not only do the Timberwolves have to get past the two-man game of Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, who they're also down 1-0 to in the Western Conference Finals at time of recording, but they'd also have to defeat the 64-win Boston Celtics in a hypothetical finals, provided the Indiana Pacers don't pull one of the biggest upsets in recent league history, of course. Although, it sounds like I've seen that movie before. But if Ant wins, we'd be looking at something truly spectacular. Something that would have seemed kind of unrealistic at the beginning of the playoffs and completely surreal at the beginning of the season. This year there will be a new NBA champion, and the Timberwolves are hungry to surprise everyone. I mean, at this point they don't really surprise anyone anymore, do they? They're one of the favorites for the simple reason of having eliminated the defending champs when no one thought they could do it.
Timberwolves have knocked out the defending champion Denver Nuggets.
They have a real chance to prove that their absolutely elite defense is capable of stopping the Mavs and whatever comes next. Something that, as we know, was built thanks to three fundamental pillars. Chris Finch, the coach in charge of setting up this defensive system, and pushing players like Karl Anthony Towns to be the best defensive version of themselves. Tim Connolly for getting the necessary assets, such as Rudy Gobert, and finally Anthony Edwards himself, who with his two-way game and leadership has helped create an identity in a franchise that had none. But the truth is that the Wolves have a very good chance to lift the Larry O this year. And man, if that were to happen, I don't think we're aware of how crazy it would be. Anthony Edwards would most likely win Finals MVP, right? Well, in that case, he would become the second youngest player in history to win the Finals MVP, behind only Magic Johnson when he won it in his picture-perfect rookie season, although he was next to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Remember we talked before about how Dwyane Wade had a similar experience? Well, he was already 24, one of the youngest to achieve it, but not as young as Ant. Tony Parker also achieved this at 24, next to Tim Duncan. Kareem did it in 1971 at 23 on the Bucks alongside Oscar Robertson. Tim Duncan also did it at 22 in his sophomore year, but alongside David Robinson. And Kawhi Leonard did it in 2014, surrounded by the talented core of the San Antonio Spurs. Anthony Edwards, at 22 years of age, would become the second youngest ever. But who does he have next to him in Minnesota? At best, it would be simply unheard of. We're tired of hearing the comparison of Edwards and MJ, for his personality, for his playstyle according to many people, for his spectacular athleticism. But you have to keep in perspective that Michael didn't win his first ring until he was 28 years old, while playing with another generational player like Scottie Pippen. Not only is Ant on the verge of achieving it much earlier, but also his company's not on par with other precocious players in winning the award. True, there would be the debate that the Wolves' supporting cast is not bad at all. In fact, it could be considered one of the best by modern NBA standards. But come on, Rudy Gobert's never been able to reach the conference finals alongside one of the best guards in the league for years. Karl Anthony Towns had never been successful in the playoffs, and his career seemed completely stagnant. These are very good players, but they needed someone who could unlock their potential, and Anthony's gone out of his way to do that. There's something that a lot of pundits or TV analysts keep repeating, that you have to lose and lose big before you win.
And usually in NBA history it says you have to lose and lose big before you win.
We lost last year.
Although it might seem like a simple cliche, a simple saying that NBA fans often use, this is a true reality. No team is ever going to go from 0 to 100 in such a short period of time. 12 months ago, the Timberwolves were a laughingstock because the player they had traded 5 first-round draft picks and several young players for wasn't proving anything. In fact, Gobert looked very out of place in Minnesota. But as of today, thanks to Ant's presence, there's no reason to think that the Wolves won't be able to offer the same resiliency they've offered this year in big moments. In a way, Edwards seems to have skipped that phase of figuring out the league, of figuring out how the NBA works and how he can find the holes where he can do damage. Ant's gone straight to the final step and is ready to compete for the greatest glory achievable as a basketball player in just 4 seasons in the league. As he said in the press conference, he's already lost in the playoffs, twice even.
We lost last year.
We lost the last 2 years. Shit.
God damn.
But he had never been a contender. The Wolves had not been a real threat to the top teams in the West before this season. They were simply a small, surmountable obstacle for the rest of the contenders in their conference. Now, we said this was the best case scenario, right? So what would happen if the Dallas Mavericks of Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving were to roll over the Wolves in the conference finals? Where would all the Edwards hype go in that case? The answer? It's something a lot of people don't expect. Over the 75-plus years of the NBA's existence, there have been thousands of players who have come through the league. Thousands of players who have played in the playoffs of completely different profiles and ages. Among them, legends who came into the league as some of the best players on the planet who established their dominance and proved their presence early in their careers.
It's been a three-point play because LeBron did travel. There we see LeBron.
Now, do you know how many of them had Ant success? Well, let's find out. This is the list of the youngest players to average at least 28 points during an entire postseason. At a glance, we see current names mixed in with some classic names. Luka Doncic, Ja Morant, Anthony Davis, LeBron James, Tracy McGrady, Michael Jordan, and then we find Anthony Edwards during these playoffs. Now, how many of these players were able to win the first round? How many of these young players were able to convert those incredible scoring averages into wins? Well, if we eliminate from the list all those who were eliminated in the first round, we're left with 2 names. LeBron James in the 2005-2006 season, and Anthony Edwards in the 2023-2024 season. I don't know how to explain it better that there isn't much precedent for what we're seeing. Ant's ability to show that he has not only the potential, but the talent and mentality to become a generational talent is indisputable. In fact, we've reached a point where this is a certainty as real as life itself. There's no reason to think that Edwards is going to stop his progression. There's nothing to indicate that his hunger for success will diminish. All we know is that, barring injury, is that we're probably seeing the worst version of the shooting guard we're going to see until his career's over. He's never going to be worse than he is now. That's what's really scary. Some fans love to compare him to Kobe Bryant, others say he's a smaller version of Kevin Durant. Still others, because of his athleticism and height, compare him to Dwyane Wade. A comparison that would make even more sense if the Wolves get what the Heat got in 2006. But that infamous comparison to Michael Jordan, which youngsters adore and old heads criticize, may not be so far from the truth. There have been many players who have been compared to him since the most influential star in NBA history hung up his Air Jordans. Dozens of players who, in any case, ended up falling short of an absurd comparison. Anthony may simply be the next such case. Maybe his performance will never get better than it is now, and the comparison with the best player in history will be too big for him. But what's incredible is that, for once, the comparison is not out of the question. It's also as real as life itself.